Just like the short 4-week patch before anniversary, this is also going to be a short and simple pulling opinion for our brand new solo unit Ashveil alongside Hyacine as well as Boothill's rerun. Hey guys, MrPokke here. So for today's episode of CN Pulling Analysis, we will be discussing whether or not you're going to be thinking of even pulling for them, considering that the upcoming version 4.2 is going to be having the double elation, Silver Knight as well as even Nisia. We'll be talking about Ashveil's kit in the early access and cup coming this Wednesday, so without further ado, let's just jump into today's content. Generally, this patch is going to be very easy to save for most players. You are either chased your Remembrance flagship back in version 3 and you do need a break from saving off your Stellar Jades, or you are going to be preparing for the Elation flagship with the upcoming version 4.2 double Elation Big Ghost, Silver Knight and even Nisia. So for players who do want to try and dabble into the follow-up archetype but did not fully commit back in Face Out as well as Robin back in version 2, Ashveil can be considered the entry pool for version 4 if follow-up attack is going to be an alternative team once Plan Arcadia ends and we go into the IPC arc. But the problem is, this is a very speculative opinion as we have no idea who is going to be the actual main DPS for Ashveil, much like pulling a support before DPS, which has been a recurring theme in version 4. Now personally speaking, just a little bonus tinfoil hat theory, Pearl was supposed to be the same banner as Ashveil based on the trailer as well as story build-up for version 4, because you can see from my animations as well as the weapon and effects of her using the paintbrush. But this is just purely going to be my speculation because I think they gave her way too much screen time even in the actual 4.1 trailer itself. She would have either probably been a teammate with Ashveil to form a double wheelchair DPS for follow-up attack teams before going into the IPC arc where we unveil the main DPS of follow-up itself, or maybe even Pearl could be a main DPS of follow-up. Maybe in tandem with Facial or Robin Nova Flare and push follow-up attack teams into a similar predicament such as DOT after Kafka as well as subsequently Black Swan. So the livestream showing only hyper carry Ashveil was also really weird because his kit was definitely leaning towards a sub DPS with a main DPS potential, not the reverse. So now we're finally going to get into the unit itself, and that's going to be Ashveil. As mentioned, the early access for Ashveil is going to be coming this Wednesday to take a deep dive, so don't worry about the too deep of details for now. As of right now from the live stream, he is going to be a follow-up attack sub DPS with a main DPS potential at the moment as seen from the 3B Sunday DHPD showcase, which is very similar back to Nexa when he was first launching. When there's gonna be a marked target for Ashveil, he also applies defense down to all targets as well as having additional energy regeneration when the marked target is attacked by your allies, which signals that the more frequently you attack the target with mark, the more frequently Ashveil can generate energy for his ultimate, which is also the second bread and butter because his ultimate is gonna be having a very big hit and having the ability to launch multiple follow-up attacks applying to different targets if the previous target was defeated based on his personal stacks. Now I would say this is gonna be an extremely nice mechanic for a follow-up team comps because one of, if not the biggest problem with follow-up attackers is that they cannot divert their attacks to another target subsequently in due time. For example, Facial is probably going to be overkilling with ultimate, same thing for Topaz and the Nambi, Mose, etc. Whereas for Ashveil, as long as you kill the target with even a single follow-up, rest of the attacks will not be wasted and transferred to another marked target, so this is going to be one of, if not the first follow-up attackers that has the ability to divert his attacking fire. So the overall attack for Ashveil is going to be at a 7 out of 10 for follow-up attackers and an overall 4 out of 10 for most players. Now Ashveil's kit as well as the launch date presents a very similar sentiment for Genshin players such as Varka mains. He is strong enough as is, but no one to bring out his true potential as of right now. Ashveil's kit is fundamentally split into two different possibilities, with a sub DPS on the follow-up attacking team as well as a main DPS by himself. So judging from the livestream, they only showcased a single team with 3B Sunday and DHPT, which may suggest that his main DPS potential is gonna outshine the sub DPS in our current follow-up attacking team, namely because right now, follow-up attack teams only really have Facial being the strongest out of everyone, and if you compare that to a version 4 DPS standard, for example, your Remembrance flagship, Elation flagship, upgraded Super Break, upgraded DOT as well as the upgraded Archer, then Facial and follow-up as a whole is gonna be falling behind despite having Cypher back in version 3. Multiplier to multiplier alone, a version 2 DPS, especially a main DPS like Facial, without any additional cost investment, can find it very challenging to compete with your version 4 archetypes. On the other hand, trying to make him match not only from a main DPS perspective will be pretty hard, especially considering the shielding environments will almost certainly pivot into Elation, especially when 4.2 releases with 2 5-star Elation units as well as the free EMC, making the overall endgame performance very questionable for Ashveil, which is going to be a ton lightning DPS. If he can perform, fantastic, but if he cannot, then it is a gamble and risk you have to take as a player, especially if you are still struggling with the endgame content as a free-to-play. If your goal is to simply make endgame content easier for you and your team, if you want to do look into your vertical cost investments, for example, of Remembrance or Elation, then Ashveil is most likely not going to be doing that for you. In a sense, for Ashveil's base kit, he is going to be having energy regeneration, good multipliers, and skill point positivity, which is very reminiscent of a Nexa main DPS back then, except that this time, we don't know who is the D Herda. Now, I will not be surprised if main DPS Ashveil is going to be the primary team as of right now for the highest possible damage, especially if you compare him to the other version 4 team comps. Overall, I will be looking forward to his main DPS potential, like all of these different RMC, Tribi, Cypher, Spargo, Sunday, etc. But there's also one very important thing to take note, which is when you're going to be pulling for Ashveil, he is most likely going to end up pivoting to a sub DPS role at the moment when a version 4 DPS is going to release, or maybe a facial Nova Flare in the future. So if you're going to be pulling him with the intention of playing him as a main DPS, personally, I do see this as a good thing for Ashveil as an overall kit, because this unit can greatly prolong his shelf life instead of being limited as the main DPS waiting for new supports. Now, when you have a stronger main DPS, especially for the follow-up attacking teams, he can then pivot into a bigger main DPS while fulfilling the role as a support / sub DPS for Ashveil himself. But then this brings us into the elephant in the room, which is his actual pull value. Generally speaking, for Ashveil, you can ask yourself this question right here that I posted on my Twitter. For majority of the players, you are likely falling into the first 2 points, aside from your husbando reasons. And that being established, only a minority of players can actually see value in pulling Ashveil as of this very moment. Because even if you are going to be pulling Ashveil for the follow-up attacking team, because we don't really know who is going to be the main DPS, at least in version 4, rerunning Ashveil in the future when that said DPS comes out will make a lot more sense if you want to decide to invest in version 4 as a whole. This means that you can save a little bit more Stellar Jades either for your Elation flagship or just waiting to see if you really like to play follow-up attacking teams in the entirety of version 4 before the main DPS comes out. Once again, before I move on from this sector, just in case people misinterpreted my point, which has been happening in my chat just now, I'm not saying that Ashveil is going to be weak as a unit, it is just more so his actual pull value relative to his timing of his banner. His performance is definitely going to be fine, it is just that do you want to spend the Stellar Jades right now investing into this unit when you could have better cost investments outside of Ashveil specifically as of this point of time. So now we're going to be jumping into the 2 rerun banners, and frankly speaking, this is going to be super quick. First of all, Hyacine. If you're still going to be lacking Hyacine with your Remembrance flagship, please, for the love of God, please just get it, right? And also her S1 is going to be a very good upgrade, but you could consider using the Mimi Gacha 4-star Lycon if you do have it. No Remembrance flagship aside, there are also My Day, Jingliu, and Blade as the alternative HP scaling DPS that can also make use of Hyacine, although none compares as strong as the actual Remembrance flagship with Castris, Cyrene, as well as Evernight. You could argue for sustainless Evernight, especially E2 Evernight being a thing, but with HP inflation as well as anti-Remembrance environment on the rise, it is better to get at least one copy of Hyacine and play a sustained Remembrance team just for your comfort. There's one more different DPS you could consider, which is going to be our Acheron with E0 S1 Hyacine, which will help Acheron generate slash dreams. But with DHPT on an E2 Silverwolf, this can also fulfill a very similar role, and on top of that, Acheron of this current moment is not looking too good, at least until we get a definitive condition whether or not she's going to be getting her Nova Flare. Also, one thing to note is that for the rerun banners, Hyacine is going to be the first 2 weeks, while Boothill is going to be the second 2 weeks. And speaking about Boothill, this is super straightforward. Husbando mains only. Insane. Okay, but for real, aside from the Firefly Nova Flare, which is another elephant in the room, you can check on this other video that we're going to be posting very soon. TLDR, maybe wait for the Boothill Nova Flare upgrade alongside a wrap up before deciding to come into Boothill. Now, if you already own Boothill and you want to improve your Boothill investments, you could consider getting this E1 or a Signature Lycon if you're still going to be running an E0 as your Boothill. But for 99% of the player base, this is probably not going to be a consideration. So in summary, for the version 4.1, generally speaking, for most players, it is pretty safe to skip this banner for now. If Ashveil pops off in the future, either because his kit is going to be extremely strong or they're going to release an even stronger main DPS for Ashveil, then you can just go ahead and pull him during his rerun unless you really want to use him right now and you are okay with foregoing some of the version 4.2 banners, which I will just remind, Hoyoverse depends on their endgame environments on the rate of units. So if they are going to be shooting for Elation, even if Ashveil himself as a unit is going to be strong, it doesn't mean that the endgame content environment is going to be strong for him, especially considering considering he is a Han DPS, one of the biggest problems is that if you're going to be putting for him, he might face difficulties when I'm going to be running him in the game mode that is pure fiction. And generally speaking, when I'm going to be putting for units, especially as it's free to play, I don't really like putting for DPS specifically for just one single endgame content unless they release more demand for multiple units at the same time. Other than that, for the reruns, Hyacine's biggest upgrade is going to be for Remembrance Flagship, though you have some other alternatives, like the teams I've mentioned before. Boothill also one away for the Nova Flare, and for any vertical investments, E1 Hyacine is really good, S1 Hyacine is really good, and same thing for E1 and S1 Boothill if you're going to be going for that. So with that, we've come to the end of today's content. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll be working on Ashveil's early access, so I won't be streaming for tomorrow. All the best for Gacha Pools. Use code POKE for 10% off gamer subs, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.